Before submitting data to the server, it is important to ensure all required form controls are filled out in the correct format. This is called client-side form validation. This video leads you through basic concept and examples of client-side form validation. Client-side validation is an initial check and an important feature of good user experience. By catching invalid data on the client side, the user can fix it straight away. If it gets to the server and then rejected, a noticeable delay is caused by a round trip to the server and then back to the client side to tell the user to fix their data. If the information is correctly formatted, the application allows the data to be submitted to the server and usually saved in the database. If the information is not correctly formatted, it gives the user an error message explaining what needs to be corrected and lets them try again. There are two different types of client-side validation that we encounter on the web. First, built-in form validation uses HTML5 form validation features. This validation generally does not require much JavaScript. Built-in form validation has better performance than JavaScript, but it is not as customizable as JavaScript validation is. Second type of client-side validation is JavaScript validation, is coding using JavaScript. This validation is completely customizable, but you need to create it all or use a library. In this example, we will use the form validation using built-in HTML5 validation. The simplest HTML5 validation feature is the require attribute to make an input mandatory. Add this attribute to the element. When this attribute is set, the element matches the required UIC2 class and the form won't submit, displaying an error message on the submission. When the input is empty, while empty, the input will also be considered invalid, matching the invalid UIC2 class. You must use JavaScript if you want to take control over the look and feel of native error messages or to deal with legacy browsers that do not support HTML built-in form validation. So in this section we will look at the different ways to do this. Most browsers supports the constraint validation API, which consists of a set of methods and properties available on the following form element DOM interfaces. Customizing these error messages is one of the most common use cases of the constraint validation API. Let's walk through the simple example of how to do this. We will start with some simple HTML. Feel free to put this in a blank HTML file. Use a fresh copy of any .html as a basis if you like. Here we store a reference to the email input, then add an event listener to it that run the contained code each time the value inside the input is changed. Inside the contained code, we check whether the email input validity type mismatch property returns true, meaning that the contained value does not match the pattern for a well-formed email address. If so, we call the set custom validity method with a custom message, which is displayed by the calling report validity function. This renders the input invalid so that when you try to submit the form, submission fails and the custom error message is displayed. If the validity type mismatch property returns false, we call the set custom validity method an empty string. This renders the input valid, so the form will submit.